tabling returns and reports.
Leave to table the annual report of the Department of Advanced Education for 84-85, the 84-85 annual report of the Alberta Heritage Scholarship Fund, the 1984 annual report of the Students' Finance Board, and the 1985 annual report of the Students' Finance Board.
Introduction of special guests.
Speaker, it's my pleasure to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Assembly 5 women from the Westlock Association for Better Government. It's rumored that they're disbanding now that their MP has resigned and they have a new MLA, Mr. Speaker. However, I'd like the House to record if they would rise in the members' gallery and receive the traditional welcome of the House.
Pleasure today to introduce to you and through you to members of the Assembly, in particular to the member for Edmonton-Belmont, several northern friends. In the members gallery seated Mr. Arnold McCallum, the MLA for the Northwest Territories, Mr. Charles Kennedy, the Deputy Mayor of Fort Smith, Mr. Don Webb with the Chamber of Commerce from Fort Smith, and Mr. Mike Heron, the Native Band Manager from Fort Smith, and along with Mr. Matthew Fraser of the Media Association. As well, Mr. Tony Punko, the representative of the advisory board from the ID-18 North from Fort Chipewyan, is along. He's well representing the band manager of the Cree Band. They've met recently with the Honourable Al Adair and myself pertaining to some transportation concerns. They've extended a warm welcome to all citizens of Alberta, in particular to visit them this summer for the promotion of tourism. I'd ask that they rise and receive the cordial welcome of the Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to the Minister of Energy. Mr. Speaker, the Premier's friends in OPEC failed to agree yet again this week, and international oil prices are in the $11 U.S. range and dropping. My question to the Minister, revolving around the meeting he had with Ms. Carney, did the Energy Minister receive any firm commitment for help from the federal government during his weekend meeting, or are we to wait a few more months while a new federal minister gets his feet wet?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition didn't ask commitment on what. The purpose of the meeting was to have a general discussion about the state of the industry in Canada and North America today, to see if we shared common understanding of the cash flow problems of the industry and forecasted reinvestment of the industry and the impact of the lower world prices on jobs in this province. We also emphasized very strongly that we felt as a first step before anything could be done, we had to have the PGRT dropped. That it would be very difficult to have meaningful discussions on longer-term solutions if the energy prices stay down, as long as the PGRT was hanging over our head. We discussed a number of proposals in a general way that have been brought to us from the industry, and then we had a good discussion on gas deregulation. I indicated a number of the concerns that the industry have relayed to me and invited her to come to Alberta and to hear firsthand from the industry some of the concerns with respect to National Energy Board decision on the surplus test and the National Energy Board rulings related to their interpretation of the export pricing test. In general, it was a very good meeting. I felt that Minister Carney was very supportive of our position, and the fact that she's no longer the Minister of Energy, I don't think really matters that much, in the sense that she's still playing a key role in the Cabinet and I believe that our concerns will be heard through her as well.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I take it by the answer we didn't get any commitment for anything other than having a nice general discussion. But to deal with the PGRT, did the minister at least receive an assurance on the date the federal cabinet will make a decision on elimination of the PGRT?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question. I wonder what they accomplished at the meeting, but I'll keep pursuing it, other than the nice friendly talk, and that's nice. But does the government view elimination of the PGRT, which most small producers don't pay anyway, as the panacea for Alberta's oil price problem? And if not, what other specific solutions is the minister pushing for from the federal government?
Mr. Speaker, I would hope that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition would recognize that the existence of the PGRT, being one of the most unfair taxes that ever was imposed upon an industry in this country, the fact that our industry today is trying to operate in an environment where prices are down considerably where they were in the past, I think he would recognize, or should recognize, the importance of the removal of the PGRT. And we were making our case very loud and clear to the Honourable Minister that before we felt we could have meaningful discussions in dealing with some of the longer-term problems of the industry should prices stay low, that in a symbolic way as well as in an important financial way, it was important to remove that tax.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I've already asked the date for the PGRT. It's an illegal tax. Yes, it should be gone. But my question was to the minister. That's not going to solve all the problems of the oil industry, especially the small producers who aren't paying that. Were there any other specific proposals that this minister took to the federal government that would help, especially the small producers in this province?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we didn't take the NDP's proposal of a floor price specifically to the table. However, it's not one that, as I indicated earlier, we were eliminating entirely from future discussions. I think it'd be very difficult, Mr. Speaker, to indicate to anyone what should be done for the industry when the industry at this particular time doesn't know what they want. I've been meeting on a regular basis with a number of people from the industry, and the IPAC group, for example, indicated to me very recently that they would like to bring some recommendations to me or to the government in a very short time. I've had discussions with them and others on a number of ideas that have been tossed about, but they indicated they would prefer to look through those ideas and come back with some specific recommendations, and I'm awaiting those recommendations. I did, however, discuss with the Honourable Minister in a general way some of the concepts that have come forth. We both agreed that the idea of a floor price at this time and government subsidization at this time were not ideas that we could accept at this time. However, we recognize the cash flow problems of the industry and the importance of having equity, and we're looking at flushing out some ideas on how the industry might be able to obtain more equity down the road.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Energy. Now that the unemployment rate has reached 20,000 in the oil industry, has he fixed some number in his mind when he and the Premier will get down and do something positive? Is it 25 or 30,000 unemployed? What is the number before you will act?
Well, Mr. Speaker, by shouting is not going to make his question any more relevant. I guess that the honourable member should recognize that it's not that easy to get an exact handle on the exact number of jobs that are affected. We think that there's a potential for approximately 20,000 jobs in this province directly over the upcoming months, should prices stay low. And that's a guesstimate. The industry have had guesstimates in a similar range and some higher. Maybe the honourable member would like to ask some of them with regard to what the estimate might give him.
To the minister, in the discussions that the minister has been having with his federal counterpart, in the middle 80s we were talking about Canadian self-sufficiency in energy, and this of course can affect us here in Alberta as it relates to our tar sands, heavy oil plants. Can the minister indicate if we still have an objective as to when Canada could be deemed self-sufficient in energy as far as our oil goes?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member raises an excellent point in that as a nation we should be looking at self-sufficiency and what can be done in this country to make sure that happens down the road. And with the decline in oil prices as we've seen them, it can't help but have an effect on self-sufficiency in this country if these prices stay low over an extended period of time. I would hope that that the industry would look in the longer term and with respect to the investments that they would be making, particularly in our heavy oil and the oil sands areas. And I think it's I haven't heard anyone disagree with the idea that prices are going to rise sometime. And when prices do rise, then these programs will be cost beneficial. I'd like to add, Mr. Speaker, that in terms of supporting the industry in the short term, we have contributed, or we have made available to the industry some $700 million since April of this year, whereas Ottawa has made available some $210 million. And so we feel that if we're going to work together effectively, the federal government has to get rid of their PGRT immediately and then discuss other things in the future, such as self-sufficiency.
I'd like to direct the second question to the Solicitor General, and it has to do with, I have here a transcript of a telegram which Jack Monroe, President of the International Woodworkers of America Regional Council, sent yesterday to the Federal Solicitor General requesting a public inquiry into the actions of the RCMP at the Ziedler strike in Slave Lake. My question is, given that the RCMP operate on contract with the provincial government to act as police in rural areas such as Slave Lake, what investigation will the Solicitor General be conducting into these allegations of police brutality and provocation in Slave Lake?
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Leader of the Opposition back from a great holiday. I am not privy to this particular communication from Mr. Monroe, nor have I been made aware of it being received by the RCMP. I will undertake to check with the Assistant Commissioner and find out the contents and their position and report back.
Well, supplementary question. We'll go into the procedures. I'll be glad to show the Minister the telegram that I received, but it notes that an IWA organizer, Mr. Harold Hawley, was choked unconscious by RCMP officers. My question is dealing with procedure. What is the procedure followed by the province for investigation of allegations of this sort?
Mr. Speaker, under the provincial agreement with the RCMP for policing, I have input into policy areas, but on the procedures of carrying out investigations or actual policing is under the jurisdiction and sole jurisdiction of the Assistant Commissioner for Division K. I am not aware of the allegations that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is making in this particular communication, and again, we'll take it under advisement.
Mr. Speaker, they allege, it's been fairly common knowledge, but anyhow, they allege that in the telegram that 30 RCMP officers appeared at the plant at precisely the time that Ziedlers chose to drive an empty bus through the picket line. Now, my question then is to do with procedure again. What degree was this done at the request of the provincial government, and what, again, is the role of Solicitor General when it comes to policing decisions of this sort?
I'll answer it anyways. I'm not aware of the particular incident. I can assure the Honourable Leader of the Opposition that the provincial government had absolutely no involvement or direction that the alleged number of police were present at the particular gate at that particular time. Again, I will reiterate that the duties of the Solicitor General are broad in the sense that we have some policy input into policing, but the actual policing procedures are the responsibility of the Assistant Commissioner.
Yes.
Any more questions on the subject, Honourable Leader? Perhaps it's just a brief one. The Minister has undertaken to review the material that you're going to supply to him, and I have difficulty whether we have room for one more supplementary on it, if you're willing.
Just on point of order, I'm trying to deal with procedures flowing from the telegram, but I'll be brief in the last question, Mr. Speaker. Will the Solicitor General be contacting his federal counterpart to support Mr. Munro's request for an impartial investigation of RCMP practices at the Slave Lake strike?
Mr. Speaker, there is a procedure that the RCMP have set up where there is a complaint registered against a particular member or members of the force in their conduct. If there has been such an allegation, I would suggest that that complaint be made with that particular board and a hearing be held.
Mr. Speaker, through to the Minister of Agriculture, in the announcement of the Guarantee Farm Credit Stability Program, there appears to be no allowance made for those years where the farmers will have no cash flow. Is he considering either in the regulations or amending to put forward some plan whereby those years where there's crop failures that the farmer, or where there's variation in income that the farmer can pay according to his ability to pay or to his cash flow?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Provincial Treasurer might wish to supplement the answer to this, as the legislation has been introduced under his name, but I can share with the Honourable Member from Westlock Sturgeon that there are provisions for refinancing whatever debt is outstanding under the present regulations and legislation that is before this chamber.
Did you wish to supplement? Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture or the Provincial Treasurer, given that it's in the present loan is to refinance, that still could the Minister guarantee some system whereby the interest of the loan available to paid by farmers in those years where the farmer does not pay income tax and therefore is not able to write off the interest costs, will the interest be reduced in those years to account for the fact that the farmer has not got taxable income?
Mr. Speaker, we campaign very actively on this program, and we feel that it is a fair interest rate at 9%. In the event that an individual farmer does not have any taxable revenue, whereby he will not be paying any taxes, I couldn't at this time give the House the commitment that those interest rates would be right off. I couldn't at this time, but it's an area that we could possibly look at. But I must share with the Honourable Member that we're very proud with what this party has done for the agricultural sector when you look at the numerous programs that we have instituted to reduce the input costs for the agricultural sector in Alberta.
Mr. Speaker, without commenting about the sign on his back that says CLEP, I would like to ask him, though, when he refers to the maximum loan of $200,000 per farm family, how does the minister define farm family? Is that spouse, daughter, daughter and son, father and son? What is the definition of farm family in the recognition of $200,000 limit per farm family?
Mr. Speaker, I think that's fairly self-evident. If you have a family that is in a farming operation, that would be classified as a farm family. What we wanted to do was avoid the possibility of stacking these benefits so that we could have the widest possible range applicable to the greatest amount of farmers throughout the province of Alberta.
Batting 1,000, 3 no answers for 3 questions, but the Farm Credit Stability makes a credit to available for refinancing and acquisition. There is a limit to the total amount that's available. Will those farmers that really need the money for refinancing and putting on inventory get precedence over those that are going to use the money to expand their farms into even bigger and bigger units?
Mr. Speaker, when one takes into account the $2 billion under this program, the excess of $1 billion under the Agricultural Development Corporation, we are involved in financing in excess of 50% of the debt that is presently in existence in our agricultural community in the province of Alberta. I should share with him that there are provisions under this program for refinancing and for the purchasing of some new commodities. We're hopeful that this will be sufficient to cover the financing needs of our agricultural sector, and I would hope that those individuals that do wish to participate in it for refinancing purposes will apply as soon as we have the brochures printed.
Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister of Agriculture. In the Minister's discussions with his federal counterparts, or counterpart in agriculture, has the Minister received any kind of a commitment to make sure that the federal government doesn't start withdrawing their support for the farmers in light of the fact that we've got this program? Because sometimes this does happen, so I want to make sure that there's been no withdrawal of services or no threatened withdrawal of financial opportunities in light of our program here.
Mr. Speaker, that's a worthwhile point. I haven't had the opportunity to discuss this specific item that has been raised by the honourable member from Clover Bar, but it is an item that I will discuss with our federal counterpart. I can't see any reason why they would, but since the honourable member has raised it, I shall convey his thoughts to the federal minister.
Member for Clover Bar, sorry, excuse me, supplementary question. Member for Drumhill? No. Clover Bar.
To the Premier or the Provincial Treasurer, there seem to be some reports coming out of Ottawa, Mr. Premier, that the federal government and the Prime Minister are looking at a business transfer tax, which is a cousin or another name for the value-added tax that is used in Europe quite commonly. Can the Minister or the Premier indicate if the Premier's had any early discussions with the Prime Minister as to the fact that we may be looking at a business transfer tax in the very, very near future?
No, I haven't, Mr. Speaker. I might say that the Minister of Finance and Provincial Treasurers met just recently, and our Honourable Provincial Treasurer may wish to advise the House as to whether or not they discussed it there.
Mr. Speaker, during our recent meeting of all ministers responsible for finance and the federal minister, we did take some time to have outlined for us by Mr. Wilson the general intention of the federal government to move with the business transfer tax. Although some of the discussions, of course, were confidential and really, at this point, fairly general in context, it is safe to say that there are both some pros and cons to this tax. And I'm not about to enter in the debate now, but I'm sure that over the next few months, after the federal government releases a paper describing the tax and the way in which it will be operated and implemented, that I'm sure we'll even get a resolution from this Assembly to discuss that issue. I should note that other provinces are looking at ways to piggyback that tax in terms of a sales tax, but of course that has unique application here in the province because we don't have that extra tax source. Mr. Speaker, I can't give further details except in a very general sense to say that it's my understanding that the federal government will move with this legislation.
Here's a supplementary question to the Treasurer. Has the Minister advised his department to be looking at what impact this would have on the Alberta economy, this proposed tax. I'm sure that this is hypothetical in a way, but on the other hand, we should have this information as to what it would do to our economy.
Mr. Speaker, I know that the government, this government is known to be always watchful of federal intrusions into our jurisdiction. Should this amount to one of those, of course, we will be mounting a very strong campaign to spell out our own provincial position. Obviously, there are some questions which come to mind, and we will have to have an opportunity, perhaps on a bilateral basis with the minister, to explore these. Nonetheless, I will give the assurance to the Assembly that we are doing all we can to understand and to develop an understanding of the program so we do have a provincial perspective as the tax arrangement does unfold.
Followed by the member for Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Environment. There's been some concerns recently about the long-term health problems that could be caused by the use of Furadan as an insecticide. Has the Minister had any research done on whether these problems are serious or not?
Mr. Speaker, in response to the question for the member from Bow Valley, some research has been done by officials in Alberta Environment with respect to this, and I understand that some research is ongoing with research scientists in Alberta Agriculture with respect to the long-term effects of Furadan.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. There's also some concern that Furadan might be in honey that's being produced now by bees that are in contact with the insecticide Furadan. Is that part of the research?
Mr. Speaker, I can't confirm that has been any actual damage caused by Furadan to bees and beehives. The information I have is that there is moderate toxicity to birds such as pheasants, mallard ducks, bull white quail, and chickens, and that some adult ring-wrecked pheasants and mallard ducks exposed during and for 14 days after spraying showed no deaths or symptoms of toxicity.
Producing honey, I trust.
Supplementary to Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of the Environment, could he tell us whether the regulations on this poison is exactly the same as Saskatchewan, or is there a difference between Saskatchewan and Alberta on this particular grasshopper poison?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The information that would go along with containers of Furadan, I believe, have national standards and criteria that they would follow, as Furadan is licensed by the Federal Department of Agriculture, so in fact they should be applicable across all provinces in the country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister of Environment, there's been concern expressed by the Alberta Beekeepers Association and some people living in the honourable member for Bow Valley's constituency that there has been a carryover of Furadan into the pollen, and that's causing mortality amongst bees this year. Could your department give the beekeepers of this province some assurance that investigations will be forthcoming on this potentially very serious problem?
Mr. Speaker, no contact has been made with me from any beekeeper with respect to this. Should the honourable member be aware of some written information that he would like to forward to me with respect to this matter, I'd be happy to have it researched and followed up.
By the Honourable Minister of the Environment to the member for Vegreville, and share with him that we have been in contact with the beekeepers, and they did indicate that concern to me also. I should share with the honourable member, when we instituted the grasshopper program for this year, we initiated an additional 3 environmental studies, including what could happen as it relates to the toxicity in honey. We will be getting back to them once we do have something to report.
Supplementary question, Minister of Agriculture. In light of the fact that there are some concerns about the pesticide that we are using, can the Minister of Agriculture indicate how extensive the program is this year, and is the grasshopper threat much diminished because of the increased moisture we've been having this year?
Mr. Speaker, our program is downgraded from last year in that we did not foresee the grasshopper program or problem as was encountered last year. And again, because there had been some concern expressed, as I indicated earlier, we are conducting, in regard to this specific program, an additional 3 environmental studies. Plus, prior to that, we did have some environmental studies taking place so that we could examine and reflect on the usage of Furadan.
The Minister of Agriculture with the specifics response to this question. In 1985, 1.1 million acres in Alberta was sprayed with carbofuran or Furadan, and that's 1.1 million acres out of 1.8 million acres.
Followed by the member for Edmonton Meadowlark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Agriculture. We've both expressed concern about the problems caused by plugged elevators and transportation-related aspects of that. I think we must realize that the problem is one of pricing also. Farmers fearing a dramatic drop in the initial prices of some $30 a ton for wheat on August 1st. Has the minister undertaken, or will he undertake, to pressure the federal government for some parity pricing plan for wheat?
Mr. Speaker, as I have indicated to the honourable member during this past week, we have had communication with the federal minister responsible. He has not yet responded to the concerns that were raised in the chamber, and as soon as he does, I'd be more than happy to inform the honourable member for Vegreville as to what his reactions have been.
I appreciate that, Mr. Speaker. I'm trying to get at the pricing aspect of the problem. Now, can the minister tell the House what the policy of this government is as regards a provincial deficiency payment to grain producers in light of the massive subsidies grain producers elsewhere in the world are receiving?
Well, I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is aware when the premiers of the Western provinces met together, they did call for a deficiency payment from the federal government. It was widely broadcast throughout the province of Alberta. I'm sure he's as much aware of it as I am that our own premier had called, along with the other Western premiers, for a deficiency payment to our grain farmers.
Mr. Speaker, a month has passed since that meeting when the Western premiers called for a deficiency payment. Has the honourable minister arranged a meeting with his federal counterpart to speed this process up or get some resolution? It's only a month now before the price drop comes into effect.
Mr. Speaker, we're aware of the various jurisdictions that relate to agriculture, some under the federal level, some under the provincial. We have consistently pushed our federal counterparts and will continue to push our federal counterparts. But in the interim, we're very proud of what we have done as a province, whereby we do have the lowest input cost for our agricultural sector as compared to any other province in Canada.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, our concern right now is not with input costs, although we appreciate the efforts made. What I'd like to find out, if possible, Mr. Speaker, is the province willing to come up with some sort of a deficiency payment for grain producers in the absence of federal action?
Mr. Speaker, as I indicated to the honourable member earlier, as soon as we have something definite from the federal government, we are in a much better position to respond. It's rather difficult to respond to a hypothetical situation until we do hear from our federal counterparts.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the minister. I'm sure the farmers were interested in hearing that's only hypothetical. The federal government has said they were interested in minimum pricing, not deficiency payments. What steps is the minister taking to try to convince his federal cousins that the steps taken to cure the situation is deficiency payments rather than domestic pricing, two-price systems?
Mr. Speaker, noting the expertise of the honourable member in agriculture, he should be aware that so many of the difficulties that we do face, both at the national and provincial level, are external forces. The U.S. Farm Bill, some of the subsidies they have in the European Economic Community. We're doing our level best to offset these detrimental programs that do relate directly to our agricultural sector in Alberta, and will continue to do so as we have done in the past.
Speaker, a supplementary question. The Minister of Agriculture. There seems to be a problem moving the grain from the prairies to the west coast because of a shortage of hopper cars. But my concern, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister is if we can get the grain there, do we have the markets? Is there still an opportunity for our commitments to be fulfilled for the contracts overseas? Do we still have that opportunity available?
Mr. Speaker, as it relates directly to the congestion, we discussed that in depth here in the chamber during the previous question periods last week. But maybe I could indicate that the elevator companies themselves could help alleviate that in that they are responsible for the allocation of rail cars, and if they would participate and let the railways themselves know as to where they would like to have some of these rail cars allocated, I'm sure it would alleviate to some degree the congestion that we are presently experiencing.
Member for Edmonton Meadowlark, followed by the member for Calgary Northwest.
Has been split between the Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs, who has responsibility for the brokerage industry, and the provincial treasurer, who regulates trust companies and other investment companies. Can the Premier please indicate which minister has been assigned the lead role for the important financial industry strategy in this province?
The provincial treasurer, Mr. Speaker.
Could the provincial treasury, Mr. Speaker, could the provincial treasurer please indicate his commitment to this responsibility, since he has reduced his budget for it from $1.5 million to $960,000?
Mr. Chairman, it's a curious way of posing a question, but if the member wants to repose it or set it again, I'd be glad to answer it in a reasonable fashion. But if he wants to talk about the estimates, there's a proper place for it. He knows where that is.
Could the provincial treasurer please indicate why Alberta financial institutions are not given contracts to manage the Heritage Savings Trust Fund when Morgan Grenfell from London, England, and Montreal Investments Corporation from Montreal are?
Well, once again, Mr. Speaker, the gentleman seems to have some knowledge here. The problem is he doesn't have his knowledge in order, and the more of he seems to have, the greater confusion he brings to the debate.
What was the question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the provincial treasurer once again, has the provincial treasurer had any input into the federal government's Bill C-86, which will alter the Canada Deposit Insurance Corporation and affect what's left of this financial industry in this province?
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, the previous ministers responsible for finance and the provincial treasurer previously have been consulted and have provided some significant contributions to the way in which the financial institutions are operating. There are a variety of points, however, which have to be considered, and I don't know the question period is the place to debate such things as the statements in the budget with respect to tax-free zones for financial institutions, or the change in the 4 pillars of the financial institutions in Canada, or for that matter, the Big Bang effect of the offshore banks. All of these, of course, have implications for the policies here in Alberta, and we have had a chance over the past 2 or 3 years to debate at the ministerial level and other levels, certainly the First Minister's level, these kinds of implications for the financial system here in Alberta.
Member for Calgary Northwest, followed by the member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A question to the Minister of Economic Development and Trade. Since the summer is a critical period for a number of small businesses, I was wondering if the Minister would be able to tell us when the Small Business Term Assistance Plan might be available.
Mr. Speaker, the Department of Economic Development and Trade, along with the Provincial Treasurer's Department, along with the financial institutions, have been working very closely in putting the final touches on the Small Business Term Assistance Program. In terms of the timing, we expect to, the Provincial Treasurer expects to introduce the legislation into the Assembly probably next week. And we would expect that the program's availability to small business in the province would occur shortly after the Farm Credit Stability Program is made available.
Question, Mr. Minister, will this plan be more than a stabilization of interest rates for a 10-year period?
I'm not sure. That question gives me a lot of scope, Mr. Speaker, and so I'll take some liberty in terms of answering it. yes, we believe that it's vitally important in terms of the name of the program is important in communicating what it's for. It provides for a small business the opportunity to restructure their financing from term debt or demand loans to long-term fixed-rate financing over up to 10 years. And it's very important in terms of the employment possibilities because it has the real effect of reducing debt servicing costs for small business. It provides them the opportunity of a long-term financial planning, and it also provides greater flexibility in terms of how their financing is arranged, both in terms of operating capital and the capital loan. So it does have a variety of features that will be helpful to small business in Alberta from a job creation sense and also in the sense of causing those small businesses that are in business to be more stable.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Will repayment of small business loans be tied to the ability to pay the cash flow of the business rather than fixed payments?
Mr. Speaker, of course, the key factor in determining the eligibility for the loan will be the ability of the business to service the debt. And there are two ways in which that can be done. The principal and interest could be amortized, or it could be done in a variety of ways. But generally, that arrangement is one that the business would make with the banker.
No supplementary on this point. Member for Calgary Mountain View.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Who will make the decisions regarding the eligibility of an individual business? Will it be the financial institution that they deal with, or will there be some criteria published from the government as to how that individual business may or may not be eligible for this program?
Mr. Speaker, there will be a set of criteria that we are developing and are nearly completed in terms of eligibility, what sort of businesses are eligible in terms of the size. Generally, in terms of the size, Mr. Speaker, it's businesses that have fewer than 100 employees, businesses with gross sales of $5 million or less, and then there will be other criteria that will be, the information will be made available widely to the small business community as well as to the bankers, so they're well aware of the criteria.
Supplementary to the Minister. Can the Minister assure the Assembly that in the businessman making the application for the loan, that it be treated more expeditiously than, let's say, AOC, the Alberta Opportunity Company? Or in many instances, the banks seem to be very, very nervous now, and sometimes these things take 6, 8, 10, 12 months to process and to make a decision. Small business, Mr. Speaker, needs a decision relatively quickly. Can the Minister assure the Assembly that in his directions to the lending institutions that they even set up a task force or do whatever they want to, that these applications be processed very rapidly and the businessman get an answer one way or the other?
Mr. Speaker, an important question, and it's important too in the light of the question asked by the member for Calgary Northwest. And that's precisely one of the reasons why the time frame for the implementation of the program will be after the Farm Credit Stability Program, so that the pressure on the financial institutions across the province to deal with the very large number of applications is handleable. And so that is why that time gap will exist. Also, another reason for the program being administered by the financial institutions is that in most cases, the small businesses will be going to their own banker who understands their business and has historically and traditionally provided them with their credit. So we expect that the process will not be as slow as might be described, as was described earlier by the member for Clover Bar.
Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care and concerns St. Joseph's Auxiliary Hospital, which is a hospital for the chronically ill in constituency I represent, Mr. Speaker. In view of the 1.5-year deadline remaining for this hospital to conform with current fire regulations, when may we expect a decision on its request to renovate the hospital, the project options for which were delivered to the Minister's predecessor in October of last year?
Mr. Speaker, that matter is under consideration by staff of the department. I don't have a timeline when either the considerations of the capital project request, any upgrading will be completed, or I'm not aware at this time of whether or not the total project as requested would be approved. I can perhaps get further information on what I see as the timeline for that project and provide it to the member at a later date.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That would indeed be useful, but a supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Will the Minister recognize that it is in the interest of Edmontonians south of the Saskatchewan River that this hospital remain in the very central and accessible location it presently occupies?
Well, it wasn't my intention to move it, Mr. Speaker.
Well, that's progress, because the hospital is on shore, Mr. Speaker. But another supplementary, will the Minister recognize, in considering the project options, that the offer of the owners, the Sisters of Providence, to make available additional land at no cost to the government for expansion of the hospital represents a substantial saving for taxpayers?
Mr. Speaker, I could not make any commitment at all at this time that such an offer might be accepted by the government. The honourable member needs to recognize that land is a very, very small portion of the capital cost and indeed the operating costs of any acute care or auxiliary care hospital. So we would have to take into consideration a great number of other factors as well, and determining whether or not we would want to accept the offer of land as a criteria on which we would construct additional facilities.
The question period has expired. We have at least 3 members waiting in the wings. Do we have unanimous consent of the House to allow 2 ministers to supplement information from previous question periods? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The Minister of Social Services, followed by the Minister of the Environment.
Thanks, Nick. Mr. Speaker, I would like to provide some clarification to the situation raised last week by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition with respect to the Calgary Single Men's Hostel. In order to put the matter in context, members of the Legislature would need to know that 10 days before the memorandum which the Leader referred to was written, the Calgary Region of Alberta Social Services took an administrative decision which changes the way the hostel will be used, and at the same time improve services to single employable people on social allowance. In the past, single employables, in order to receive benefits, had to be served at the hostel. This decision allows people to be served where they live through the department's district office system. The memo then should be viewed in the context of social allowance clientele only and not in the context of the total utilization of the hostel. Mr. Speaker, in the early 1980s, the hostel had the capacity of 400 and was overflowing. Our service to people has now become more flexible. We now provide benefits to more than 3,400 single employable men in the Calgary area without the need for most of them to contact the hostel. The Honourable Member for Cypress Redcliffe asked about the occupancy rate of the hostel and what had it been over the last year. And Mr. Speaker, it has averaged 73% of a capacity of 238 and is currently much lower. And as a consequence, beds are indeed being closed unless utilization increases in an effort not to waste taxpayers' dollars. We believe that utilization by single employable men will continue to decrease dramatically. And I would like to give this House 2 assurances which should correct any misconceptions that may have been left. The Calgary Single Men's Hostel will not be shut down. It will continue to be available, particularly for indigents, alcoholics, and the hard to house, and for some single employable men who may choose to ask for service there. The other assurance, Mr. Speaker, is that no service that is needed is being decreased or abandoned, and I am confident that single employable men in Calgary are of the view that the services have, in fact, been improved.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On Friday last, June 27, a series of questions were directed to me, and I would like to supplement the information that's already contained in Hansard. The first question was from the member from Little Bow, and the response is neither party may transfer or assign a partial or whole interest in the joint venture without the approval of the other party. Second question from member from Little Bow. My response is, as far as I know, there are no restrictions in either party as to their source of funds. Third question from the member from Little Bow is basically I've been identified already. Fourth question from the member for Little Bow dealt with information on taxes paid by Bow Valley Resources, and I suspect that that information should come from the company's annual reports. Next question came from the member for Westlock Sturgeon, and I think I'll be careful to make sure that I provide a full answer. The Alberta Special Waste Management Corporation is not providing any loan guarantees to Bow Valley Resource Services Limited. Neither is the Government of Alberta providing any such guarantees for loans which Bow Valley Resource Services Limited may or may not make to acquire their assets at the Swan Hill Special Waste Management Facility. And the last question, Mr. Speaker, is in response to a question from the member from Edmonton Glengarry asking for my assurances, and my response is yes.
Orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I would move that the question and the